What recently transpired in the 2020 election is a direct result of what happened in 2016. I'm sure many people are still scratching their heads. How could there have been this huge swing of votes, first one way and then back the other and then back again? Because that's what we saw. Well, there's an explanation for it, and it's going to take a little bit to explain, so get a cup of coffee, get comfortable, we're going to be here a while. We have three major topics to cover, but once I lay this out for you guys, it's going to make perfect sense. The three major topics are historical elections, psychological operations, and the third one is inside baseball from YouTube, meaning as a YouTuber, somebody who does it for a living, we see things and we get information from YouTube that isn't widely known. We have very stringent standards to adhere to, and something happened in 2017 that puts all of this together. It's the glue that explains what happened. Now, to explain what happened, we have to go into history for just a minute. We're going to jump back to 2000. These are the results of that election. It was widely known because, of course, the Florida recount and all this. We're not going to look at electoral votes. We're just going to look at popular vote, because that's all the left looks at. That's all they care about. And this is how they think they are going to win going forward. They've thought this for a long time. 50.99 million votes for Al Gore, 50.456 for George Bush. But what do we know about both of those candidates? Both of those candidates, of course, were establishment, Democrat and Republican, the Republicrat tyranny that we've talked about. So we had two establishment candidates running against each other. Basic rules applied. Now, there was a quirk in the Electoral College here that allowed George Bush to retain the presidency. Let's go to 2004, and let's see what changed. Well, let's see. George Bush got 62 million votes, and John Kerry got 59. Now, there was a big jump in the amount of votes here for both candidates, and that had a lot to do with online registration. But the jump was equivalent across both establishment candidates. Kerry was once again establishment Democrat, George Bush establishment Republican, 62 to 59 roughly. So predictable numbers for establishment candidates. Now, here's where things go sideways. 2008. Barack Obama gets 69 million votes. John McCain, 59 million. Well, let's see. 59 million for John McCain. Let's go back to 04. And 62 for George Bush here. And what would have been the equivalent of about the same back in 2000. So they stayed with the same old playbook. What did the left do? See, the left decided to go farther into the extreme of their party, and they energized a new group of voters. And this is the real topic today. I know it took me 4 minutes to get here, but this is the real topic. The new group of voters. They were able to pull people into the voting sphere that hadn't voted before because of the quote-unquote historic nature. You see, they didn't pull votes away from the Republican Party. They just added votes. And that's why he won big. 69.5 to just 60, almost 10 million votes. Now, 4 years later, however, the bloom was off the rose. Barack Obama only got 65.9. He lost 4 million votes. And Romney was able to get an extra million out of that, but it still didn't make a difference, not a big enough difference. But we see something with these establishment candidates, whether it's Romney, whether it's McCain, or Bush, or Gore, there's a predictable amount of people that are going to vote for them. Now, 2016. You see, Trump learned something from this. He really did. He learned a lot from the Obama years. He's like, well, gosh, if they can pull new people into the voting sphere, why can't I? And lo and behold, what do we see here? All of a sudden, 62.9 million votes for Donald Trump. You see, they're like, wait a minute, how did this happen? They were all up in arms. Hillary won the popular vote. But more importantly, this is what they were concerned about. They thought Republican votes were pretty much stagnant at 60 million. That they wouldn't be able to get very many more. 60, 61. This guy got 63. Where did the new votes come from? Where did the new votes come from? Now, I'm going to use some images here to illustrate this. I know we're 6 minutes in, but I have to lay this groundwork to explain this. There's a thing called the silent majority, and it is a giant sea of red. It is a giant sea of untapped red votes because it has to do with the philosophy of the left. They go after kids. They go after the youth, and they get them involved in civics because they can make what they call the moral imperative argument with kids because they're not developed mentally. Everything is black and white to a kid. So it's easy to manipulate them. But there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that. They can't really grow that group of people because as people age and become older, they just become more conservative. So they know at some point the vast majority of their voters are going to flip, or they're going to enter the silent majority. So they have to keep replenishing. So it disturbed them, the left, that Donald Trump was able to reach into the vast sea of red and pull out voters and make them activists again. You see, they had no equivalent blue hole. They had no equivalent blue hole to draw from. They're like, we can't get any more blue voters. Now, let's go back here and let's look at the current election. All of a sudden, Joe Biden, establishment Democrat, has nearly 75 million votes. But more importantly, Donald Trump is closing in on 71. Wait a minute. Hold on. Back the truck up. So you're saying Donald Trump went from 63 million to 71 million. That means he increased his base by 8 million votes. But Joe Biden, Establishment D, increased their base by 10. By 10. Sitting in his basement. Sitting in his basement all summer. You're telling me Joe Biden, establishment Democrat, increased the base by 10 million voters. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already thinking, well, they cheated. They just created. No. Well, they did cheat. And they did create. But they're not just out of thin air. You see, they're coming from a group of people. They're coming from a certain group of people. This is where they're getting the votes. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already laughing, already clicking off the video, ready to scroll. What are you talking about? Kids can't vote. If you mail them a blank ballot, they can. If you mail them a blank ballot and they're stuck home doing nothing, they can. They can even grab that sucker and they can throw it on the copier and they can make 20 or 30 copies and they can fill it out and they can send it in. You see, this whole idea of keeping the kids home from school, does that make sense now? That's why they didn't want the kids in school. Now, so we have covered history, and we've covered a certain aspect of psychological operations called the moral imperative. You see, it's real easy to convince kids, no matter how bad what they're doing is, that if there's a moral imperative behind it, it's really right. It's the ends justify the means argument. It's the ends justify the means argument. And that's where we come back here. You see, this was the whole point of Greta Thunberg. See, they had to activate a bunch of kids. They had to mentally activate, socially activate, in the civic sphere, a bunch of kids. Why? Why did they have to do that? That's their blue hole. You see, they don't have an answer. They don't have an answer for the silent majority. Because as people get older, they get more conservative, and either they stop voting or they vote red. Where are they going to get the answer to Donald Trump's alt-right? Well, they have this giant pond of blue voters. Now, the third aspect that puts the glue on this has to do with something that happened on YouTube. You see, they really blamed YouTube for Trump's win. They really, really blamed him for this silent majority. They called him the alt-right back in 2016. They were not happy about this. So the first thing they had to do is pull this out. These are the fines against Google. They had to go after big tech and say, we're going to fine you because you know what? We need to protect the children. We need to keep YouTubers with this horrible alt-right belief system from getting to the kids. We can't have them getting to the kids and talking to the kids. You know why? We need an untainted blue hole. We need our pond, every time we dip our bucket into it, to come out completely blue. No conservative thought allowed. You cannot, as a conservative, talk to kids. Now, a lot of YouTubers understand this because we are here making money, but a lot of YouTubers are activists. They don't care about making money. They can just make videos talking about whatever activist nonsense they want to, and they don't care if they monetize them or not. And so they can sit and work on these kids and turn them even bluer. Now, YouTube inside baseball. This is the part that a lot of people don't get. Back in 2017, and you don't have to get this because you're not a YouTuber, you would know this. Back in 2017, every channel had to declare whether your channel was quote-unquote safe for kids or not. And if you declared that your channel was safe for kids, and they found anything at all that could remotely be construed as possibly damaging to their fragile little psyches, you were gone. Not only were you gone, you could be sued. So any sane YouTuber who wanted to keep his channel clicked the box that said, not safe for kids. And that got you out of it. So what they did, though, is they said, okay, you check this box. We are never going to show your video anywhere around anything that a kid might be construed as possibly liking. And the numbers cratered. See, over 65% of YouTube is actually gamers and kids. And so they created YouTube Kids for the real young ones, but the teenagers is who they wanted. And there wasn't a thing we could do about it. There wasn't a thing we could do about it. So what they created was this safe space, this safe blue hole to answer the sea of red for the silent majority. This is what they did. This is the real crime big tech has committed. What they've done is create a vast new group of voters that technically aren't old enough to vote. But once again, when you keep kids home from school and you send out a bunch of mail-in ballots with no information on them, and then you work the moral imperative argument saying you have to vote because of the climate emergency, and you don't allow any other opposing view to talk to those kids, what do you think was going to happen? What do you think was going to happen? This is what it's all about. This explains the 10 million votes that just magically appeared for a establishment Democrat. For an establishment Democrat. There's absolutely no way Joe Biden is 10 million votes more popular than Hillary Clinton, especially when the opponent that he's running against increased his base from 63 million to 71 million. The votes that voted for Biden didn't come from Trump's base. There weren't a bunch of people that said, oh gosh, Trump was really a fake and man, we can't believe we got suckered into that. We're going to vote for Biden this time. That didn't happen. See, the number they can't explain is how did Trump increase his voter base by 7, almost 8 million votes? But Biden outperformed Hillary by what, 11? He even outperformed Obama in 2008 by 5 million votes. Hey, folks out there in the black community, was that really the reason you voted for Barack Obama? Because he had Joe Biden as a running mate? See, only 69 million people voted for Barack Obama then. 5 million more, allegedly, are now voting for Joe Biden. There's only one place, only one group of people that was large enough, unaccounted for, that could have explained this difference. And this is it. This is what happened. You had a bunch of kids who were stuck home, bored out of their mind, and then all of a sudden, these ballots showed up. And they had been worked on for years and years and years, with no opposing view allowed. See, that's the YouTube part of the argument. See, they know kids consume so much YouTube. They had to make sure, they had to make absolutely sure no opposing view was allowed, that they couldn't see it. And the only way they could do that is to threaten YouTubers. And say, if you want to stay monetized, if you want to stay in business, you have to tell us to not show your videos to kids. Because you might influence them. And we can't have that because we need our own blue hole, just like you have your giant red lake of silent majority. And we need to manipulate them with no interference from you. And that's what this is really all about. It's what it's been about from the beginning. And that's why I used this picture in my post last night. They went radical. They went radical and they used their allies in big media, in big tech, to mess with the money of their competition, opposing viewpoint. And they went after people that it was the only place they could go. They literally couldn't invent enough votes and get away with it. So they had to have the volume. See, I'm not alleging that they committed fraud by thousands or 10,000 or 25,000 or 50,000. I'm alleging that these people defrauded our country in the millions of votes from people who are not old enough to vote. But you see, for them, and I'm going to go back to this again, They have what they believe is the moral imperative argument. See, for them, cheating doesn't matter. Cheating doesn't matter because they have the climate emergency on their side. And kids are really easy to convince of this, that everything is here or there. This is also a problem with the two-party system, but that's another video for another day. You're either right or you're wrong. You're good or you're bad. And this is reassuring to kids because kids like boundaries. Kids like things easy to identify because they're not emotionally, mentally, socially, politically mature yet to understand that there are good and valid arguments on both sides. See, the left couldn't have that. The left couldn't have that because once this is an emotional thing for them, not thought-based, and that's yet another video we could do. But this is where it came from. Very simply put, kids at home, ballot shows up in the mail, run off 1,000 copies, and send them all in. And send them all in. Because of the moral imperative argument. Because they sat and watched YouTube for the last 4 years with only one viewpoint. So I guess I will leave it there, and I'll just leave it with these two images to kind of let it soak in what they did and why they did it. Like, share, subscribe.